Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. It's great to have you with us, and today is a great day for us. We have two amazing people who have done a lot for the industry and who are also trying their best to make sure that whatever they have learned over the years are also being recorded, documented, and available for us to refer to whenever we want. I am very, very happy to introduce two amazing people today. And the best part for me is that, I've known them for more than a decade, or almost a decade and a half now. Great pleasure to introduce Kiran Telang. Kiran is a practicing financial planner based in Mumbai, and she has over 2 decades of experience. She is also, a SEBI registered investment advisor. Of course, she's a very dear certified financial planning professional and a postgraduate in management from the University of Mumbai. Besides the educational qualification, I can also say that Kiran is one such person who has always been in the forefront of contributing to the profession. She writes a lot of her articles are visible in newspapers, in some of the media that covers, personal finance, and of course, she's been an author to a few other books too. And one was on mindful retirement, and that's a book I love reading too. Along with Kiran, welcome Kiran.
Thank you, Rajesh.
Pleasure to have you. Along with Kiran, I have my good friend and another prolific writer, speaker, thinker, Amit Trivedi. To a lot of you, or for those of you who are connected to the industry, he needs no introduction, but let me do the honors here once again. Amit is also somebody who's had multiple decades of experience in the financial markets. And I must say that, maybe I stopped counting after I received a message from him. Very clearly, he is over 800 articles, old, if I were to put it in that way, in terms of writing. And the number of participants probably he's trained is very close to 1.5 lakh people over almost 1,400, 1,500 programs connected to the industry. So an amazing person who has been there, who's been, in the thick of action, been with the crowd, been on the ground. And not just that, I've also had the privilege to work with him in the National Institute of Stock Markets, Securities Markets, committees on investment advisors and retirement advisors examinations. And we've been, fortunate to also exchange notes on topics that are connected to both these disciplines. I also wanted to mention that Amit was chosen by the Chitralekha magazine as one of the 50 glorious Gujaratis in 2019. And the Association of International Wealth Management of India recognized him as among India's 25 best finance teachers. That was not too far away. That was just last year, 2021. So with that, welcome Amit. It's been a great pleasure to know you and continue to be working with you.
Thank you so much.
So yes, with these introductions, I think we've set the stage for an amazing conversation as well. Let me start by asking both of you. The latest book that I had my hands on, thanks to both of you, was Money Wise: Perspectives for Women. And our discussion today is women and financial planning. A lot of people ask me or send me messages with this question, Rajesh, why is it not women in financial planning? I said this is beyond just people in financial planning. This is and financial planning. So let me start with that. Both of you, please feel free to share your perspectives on what kind of prompted this whole writing on women and financial planning.
Kiran, you want to start?
Maybe Amit, you can start. I'll follow on.
Okay. Rajesh, this is a very important question that a lot of times what we observed is women are not involved in their family's financial matters the way they should. And sometimes that actually results into major trouble for the family. So I came across a few cases maybe a decade and a half back where because of the death of the main earner of the family or the man of the family, let me put it this way, not just earner, in a couple of cases the person was retired also. But when the man died, the lady did not know the financial situation of the family, and she had never involved herself into management of or the decisions pertaining to management of money. Incidentally, this 4 or 5 cases came to me because these were within family, friend circle, etc. And somehow they approached me, and it was a shock. Like, is this real? I mean, that was a question in my mind. And the next follow-up question was, what if somebody approaches a known person for help? Now, that known person needs to have two qualities. One, competence, and second, integrity. Both are equally important. In the absence of one, the lady will be in deep soup. And that started me on, thinking on these lines. And then at some point in time, I thought of writing a book. But if I write a book, there are two handicaps that I have. One, I'm a man. Writing about women may not be taken very well by a lot of people. Secondly, I'm a theoretician. I'm not practicing financial planner. So I may miss out on a lot of points. So that's where I thought of partnering with somebody, drew out a list, and incidentally, Kiran happened to be on the top of the list. And on one of the days when we were going to NISM for a session, I asked her. She said, "Let me think over it," and because her first book was getting finished at that point in time, Mindful Retirement.
Yes.
So she said, "Give me some time. I'm too tied up with this." But a couple of months later, when we again discussed, she said, "Yeah, let's do it together." And that's how the book started. And I think thanks to her, I think the way the book has come up, we discuss about that topic in the mind of a woman. Now, I mean, impossible for me to understand. But when both of us joined together, I think it brought out the best from us. Yeah,
That's
over to you,
amazing.
Kiran.
Yeah, so Amit has kind of described the story of why the book began. So at my end, what happened was, again, these kind of stories with Amit was sharing that women face trouble when there are issues and when they have to manage finance alone, which they've never done earlier. So I had been seeing that in my practice as well, and I'd been seeing amongst couples also, the women tend not to be so interested in, knowing the details of what's happening with their money. So that was one area which I felt that needed to be brought out. The conversations needed to begin in that area as well. Another area which I was interested in obviously was retirement, because I was handling a lot of retired clients. So these were two areas which I felt that I would write someday, and retirement just happened to be the first. And Amit very conveniently came right at the time when my first book was already done, and this opportunity to write with him on the second book came through. And it was a very enjoyable journey of writing the book. And while Amit says that he's a theoretician, but he brings a lot of practical knowledge from people he meets, and the experiences that he's had over the years, listening to people and their stories. I think that adds tremendous value to any such project, which helps people understand things about money and how they need to approach the whole aspect. So I think that the joint working worked out very well, and it helped that we think very similarly on lot many topics. So there was less of friction in terms of writing, So it was a very enjoyable journey. And I think the main aim here with this book was that women don't know where to begin, when they talk about money. So where do I start? I mean, they just want, probably like many other people, that just give me the names of schemes or products where I need to invest, and that's it. But if they want to understand more deeply about how to handle money, I think there needs to be a starting point, and probably this book could be a starting point for them to understand the whole picture about the role the money plays in their lives and how to go about it. What situations could arise, which I mean, people wouldn't think, but there could be bad situations, and also, I mean, situations which are good where women will need to handle the money. So both ways, I think this could be a good conversation starter, a food for thought kind of a product for most women. And for that matter, even men and families. I wouldn't say this is relevant only to women, but also to the partners to understand what actually goes on in a woman's mind. About money. What are the problems that she faces? Because not many people are aware of these nuances. It's just one more thing in their life, and it just stays there.
I mean, when I should hold you there, and I must say that stay there. I will have one more question. In your own life, Kiran, when did you really connect with the thought of money or the concept of money? I mean, that's going to be an interesting point for us to build on.
Uh, well, I think FPSB and India has a big role to play there. So actually, when it happened for me is when I started doing the CFP course, and the enormity of it all, and getting together of all the aspects of money management came together. That's when I really realized. I mean, though, see, I come from a banking family, and money was something which was discussed in the family, and there were family values about saving and investing, which were automatically picked up as a child. But as far as handling my own money goes, or looking at the bigger picture, that did not happen till I was few years in a job. And actually, I quit my job to study the CFP certification course, and that is when the entire thing fell into place. And it not only improved my life, it also is was the beginning of my career as a financial planner. So I think CFP certification really mattered there.
Thank you, thank you. I think with that, we can set the stage for probably a nice journey of understanding the different phases that a woman goes through, and in those phases, how connections with money is or isn't established, or perspectives that you have yourself shared in such great detail in the book. So Amit, shall I start with you?
Sure.
Would you like to take on the first phase, and how would you want to term that?
Okay. So, the different stages that we talk about, I would say it actually starts with the childhood, and that's where parents have to play a major role in educating the children. Now, it doesn't matter whether it is a boy or a girl. Both need to be educated with a slight difference. We live in a patriarchal society. So in most cases, the girl would get married and go to another family. And in that case, her situation becomes very different from a boy who gets married and stays in the parents' home. So that difference has to be culturally, the big one. Parents need to be sensitive about that part. Now, at that stage, if the girl is taught to be financially independent before she gets married, I think that would be a great service to the girl. Now, financially independent doesn't really mean that she needs to have so much wealth, but at least she is able to think independently because she has better understanding of the current situation and what she wants in life. So she should be able to engage into that conversation, because one of the points that you've covered in the chapter on the mind of the woman is that how does a young girl, let's say in early 20s, when she gets married and goes into a joint family, for example, how can she start asking money related questions to the father-in-law? I mean, that's like sounds very difficult for anybody to fathom. Having said that, if the parents have groomed her in a particular manner, then she would be able to do certain things. The second point is when it's said that when you teach a man, you teach a man. When you teach a woman, you teach a family. And that also works in this case. So if the girl is groomed properly, or even at a later stage when she gets married and the husband or the father-in-law starts to involve her in the discussions, that also goes a long way in ensuring at least the next generation would be financially more responsible and in a better situation. If one has not done all these things, then at later stage, if something happens when the girl has to, or the lady has to get involved in money management, the initial phase becomes extremely difficult. Uh, my observation is that once the lady starts putting herself in that role, then she finds ways to manage the money well. But before she settles down in that role, if something goes wrong, and that could be a huge risk area, or a huge landmine, if I were to use that word. Even at later stage, I've seen, I mean, widows, so somebody widowed after, let's say, 55, 60 years of age. They've also been able to put themselves together and, get back in the normal stage, and then they keep it simple, but they are able to manage quite well. I think that keep it simple is a better thing. So these are various phases where that we've seen, and I'm not even referring to some of the deviations that may happen in life, the negatives, and at all these stages, knowing about where the money is, what is the money meant for, and rather these two are the critical inputs. So what is the money meant for, the objective, and where all the finances are. These two are the starting points.
Kiran, you had something to add there?
I think Amit has covered it brilliantly in that way, you know. So I mean, money is gender agnostic. So whether it's a boy or a girl, you teach them the same way, the importance of money, how do you handle it, how do you respect money. So all those things are generally, I mean, between a boy and a girl, you don't differentiate. And that culturally also needs to come in. So while in urban societies we are seeing that there's no differentiation as such in terms of imparting knowledge to both the boy and the girl child. In maybe smaller towns or in more traditional families, most of the times we still see that the girls are far behind in terms of these kind of knowledges. They are not open to asking questions. They are not allowed to ask questions about money. So that does bring a bit of a difference. And when these young girls, they move to other towns for maybe work, or if they get married and they move to a bigger town or a metro, then those cultural differences come to fore, and then they are kind of lost for some time. But many of the women are able to pick up the threads and take it from there. But as I said, where do we begin? I mean, that is a big question for them. And we just hope that they pick up the right part to understand, because there are a lot many areas where they can go wrong with the kind of knowledge sharing that is happening on all kinds of social media. So there are a lot many things which are also incorrect, which are being propagated. So I just hope that they pick up the right thing and not the wrong thing, because it can go haywire if they pick up the wrong advice and start acting on it.
Well, then again, I would say I will hold you there, and I'll come back to you with one more related question, Kiran. Because Amit was mentioning about the phase of life before a woman probably is handed over from one family to another. In the Indian traditional way, the way I look at it, you marry a girl off, right? I mean, that's the concept there. But let me just go one step before that. Today we see a lot of young, and again, these are also blurring. I mean, while in the traditional sense we say beti ko diya hai, but now that is also blurring, right? I mean, beta is also coming here, and people are all living together. It's all fine nowadays. Those lines are blurred. But just from a very simplistic point of view, if you look at it, many times nowadays we see that these lines being blurred, young women are also now beginning to work not just from urban. I mean, we are just not talking about urban crowd. Today we are seeing that even from tier 2, 3, and even sometimes in even rural areas, we see that there is an empowerment that is happening, a conversation around women empowerment that is happening. There is political conversation. There is, UN, sustainable development goals based conversations. Financial markets, we are talking about inclusion. We are talking about access. We are talking. So there is a lot happening. To connect women and the mainstream, be it the economic markets, the cultural, or the social aspects. So in that, Kiran, if I look at it, we have increasingly seen that women start working or pick up, either an employment, or they are joining somebody, sort of a, informal employment, or sometimes they even become entrepreneurs. And that's a stage where, I thought would be worth asking this question. Isn't that the stage where they should really be thinking about financial planning? Or what in your experience as you were going through and writing this book is able to connect to women and financial planning? At what stage a young adult woman should be thinking about financial planning?
That's a brilliant question, Rajesh. So let me just take this age group of say maybe 18 to 28, that 10 years where you are just out of college or you're just learning things and you start earning, and it's before marriage kind of a thing. So that's a very exciting phase for most young adults. And it's the first time that they actually, get to know seriously about things, because before that parents consider them as children and not really put them into these kind of areas where they could get to learn. So one part is where let me come to women. So one part is where the women start learning about things, because I've seen parents of my daughter's friends and all, they want their 18-year-olds and 20-year-olds to actually start learning about how to invest money. Unfortunately, what I've seen is that most of the courses that are available are related to trading in the stock markets, and that is considered as a great knowledge. So while that could be a skill that is developed, there is still a lack of areas in which a holistic thinking about money management needs to be taught. So that is a gap area which I feel is there, and that is where we as planners, me and Amit, we have been talking on these terms, where we can kind of develop some program where we can help these younger adults to learn about money management and what are the pros and cons, and how do you think about investing. So other skills, maybe trading or even investing, can be taught, and there are various established courses for that. Now once this knowledge part has been taken care of, once the young ones actually start earning on their own, what happens is there is a lot of things available on social media. There are a lot of options which are brought in front of them to invest, and since it's the first time they're handling money and it all seems so exciting, they would want to try a lot of things. So initial few years of the career are kind of maybe lost in terms of trial and error in what they do. And we all know that wealth creation requires compounding, and compounding is dependent on the time that you are investing your money. So if you lose the first decade of your career in all kinds of trial and error, that is a decade lost in terms of wealth creation. Uh, I try to bring across this point to the young children of my clients who have just started earning, that do your trial and error with some portion of your money. Keep the core of your wealth creation in the normal, traditional, simple things like, say, mutual funds, or if you understand stocks, do that and let that compound. Because a decade down, when you have serious responsibilities on your shoulders, that is when you will thank yourself for being straightforward in your investing, and whatever other things you want to learn. Latest is of course cryptocurrencies. Young people are very excited by that kind of opportunity, which is very new, very easy to do. So ease of investing is equated with uh, doing great investments. So those are the things which will eventually give them some kind of experience. They will learn, they will fall, they will pick up again. So that needs to be segregated at that point in time. Now, for women, what happens is traditionally, once they get married, there would be responsibilities. There could be career breaks because of childbirth and such things. So, for women, this period before marriage becomes very crucial. So, this is when they can actually create some wealth of their own without having any financial responsibilities of the family. And if at all they need to take a break later, a sabbatical or a short break in their career, this is the money that they can draw upon. Using maybe something like a simple system, like a systematic withdrawal from, say, mutual funds. That could be one of the options.
Yes.
Or some kind of income can be derived out of the wealth that they've created in this case. So for women, I think this becomes even more crucial than men in terms of accumulation of wealth, the initial maybe 5 to 10 years of their career.
Just to add to what Kiran mentioned, a couple of points. One is the courses that she was mentioning. They are more focused on the how part, how to do something, but not on the why part. Why do we need to manage money in the first place? What is the purpose of money in the context of life? So that is where we want to focus on. So that's one part. The second is a very important point that Kiran mentioned about the wealth, whatever little wealth that a girl can accumulate in the first 10 years of her career, or whatever her parents might have accumulated for her. Now, that wealth, even if she doesn't draw from that wealth, having that wealth gives so much confidence to the girl to take certain decisions, and then that makes a huge difference to the life. So having that safety net boosts the confidence big time.
That connects me, Amit, to another interesting point that comes up, because Kiran mentioned about starting early, trying to at least she mentioned few things. Two points I noted was they should they might end up falling. They will learn to pick themselves up. Very important, because somewhere in the back of our minds we always kind of encourage people to be successful all the time. And in that context, when you look at it, this statement that Kiran made is very, very I would say it's very intriguing, right? Because you are telling that you might fail, and as you fail you will also learn to pick yourself up. So is there something that you could share a little more on that? Maybe it's about how we should think as people dealing with money matters. How we should think of guiding people who probably might have not done well with their financial decisions earlier. Anything around it that you could share?
Yeah, so in my profile I mentioned that I am a student of the School of Trial and Error, University of Life. Right, so that's what that's how I've learned a lot of things. Now, very important point that Kiran mentioned is, yes, all of us have the ability to pick ourselves up even after we fall, but that will to pick ourselves up and get up is equally important. Number two, at a certain age or certain stage in life, you can afford to fall multiple times and get up. At a different stage of life, your ability to lose goes down because the responsibilities have gone up. And number three, the best part of what my personal learning is that while it is all about falling and picking yourself up, you don't need to make all the errors yourselves or all the mistakes yourselves, because before us, so many people have made so many mistakes, and we can simply learn from them. But having that confidence that yes, I can pick myself up allows us to take certain risks. But even when we have to take certain risks, so let's say when a toddler starts to walk, the parents know that the kid would fall and pick herself up and start walking again. But what do? We don't keep any of the sharp objects or such things which could hurt the child close by. So we avoid certain risks And the same principles apply in the world of investing as well. We know that in the initial phase we are going to fall, but how much do I want to fall and how much do I want to pick myself up? Because if it's a school of trial and error, I'm paying education fee. So let us decide how much fee that I want to pay. I don't want to pay my father's entire net worth towards my education. So set a limit. So that's where when Kiran said that, okay, so much money for these activities, but so much money for serious wealth creation. Segregate, put them into the compartments. Treat one part as you may not get it back. And if you get it back, yeah, wow, I mean, it's a scholarship that you got from the college. Treat it that way.
Well, I think I should request you to repeat that first statement you made about time and the university.
Sorry.
School of trial and error, I think that's what you mentioned.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's the school of trial and error, university of life. That's how we learn. I mean, what we learn in school and college, again, go back to our entire education system, and we are taught very little about handling finances. But we are equipped to learn skills which allow us to earn money. So we know how to earn money. Many of us are very good at putting our professional skills to earn money. But after earning that money, what do we do?
Yes.
And that's where a lot of us fall flat. In fact, having interacted with some extremely senior people in the fund management industry, when I was talking about what we've covered in the book, one of the very respected and senior person told me, "Oh, there is so much beyond money. Investing. I did not know this." One person said, "Is there so much beyond mutual funds?" I did not know that. And these are senior finance professionals. Forget about lay people.
Well, which is what, some of my friends who are doctors also mention, they become so specialized in certain areas that it's difficult for them to kind of keep their eyes and ears open on various other aspects of life.
Absolutely.
Particularly, COVID and all, which threw a lot of surprises, unpleasant experiences to a lot of people. They kind of, brought up these conversations. But having said that, Kiran, back to you. Amit mentioned, when senior people kind of, are surprised when they look at matters beyond the usual. We talk about bank deposits, we talk about mutual funds, but there are many other things that you've covered in perspectives for women. Would you just like to spend a few minutes sharing that as well?
Well, see, typically, the investment options, I mean, if we look at, so there are just 4 basic asset classes which we are looking at in India, traditionally for any normal family. So it would be equity, whether it is in form of mutual funds or direct stock investing. We have debt, which is probably the most popular area. People don't know it's called debt, but bank fixed deposits, PPF, postal savings, and debt mutual funds, obviously, which is still very new to a lot many people. Then we have real estate, which is another favorite for most of the Indian families. So real estate, we have newer things coming in, REITs and InvITs are coming in. We have commercial real estate, which people have now started getting into. So those options are available. The 4th asset class is commodity, but in commodity, so far we've just had gold, which could be accessed easily as an investment option. Silver has just started off. So, primarily these are the 4 things that are there, and within this, there will be several products or several combinations that are available to people. So, while we have tried to give a basic idea about how and what of these instruments, there is a lot more to creating a portfolio just than knowing about these individual things, that how each of them is correlated, what is the liquidity, what are the risks associated, and how is it going to impact if any of those risks play out. So, these are the factors which come in when you actually create a financial plan. And beyond this, I mean, if you look at the life of an individual when you are planning for a client, these are the building blocks But when you drop the design, when you drop the financial plan, the core of it is the kind of life that the client wants to lead. So that kind of life could be defined by certain goals, which could again, broadly be divided into responsibilities and dreams. So responsibilities, typically children's education, their own retirement, building your own home, so these are the typical responsibilities that come through. Dreams are obviously living in a kind of a house that you want, maybe a bigger house, a bungalow, or maybe somewhere in the hills. Some people would want to live near to the beach, so these are dreams which are there. So how do you incorporate all of these dreams and responsibilities using these building blocks of the various instruments that are available? So you kind of weave everything together and draw up a nice drape for the client, and you keep on changing as situations change. Life happens. I mean, it will not obviously go as per plan. So you just need to keep track and directionally correct, and leave aside the smaller things which really don't matter. What is happening with uh, the rest of the world. So you focus on your own thing, and the rest of the world will keep doing what they have to do.
I mean, then I should prod you to talk a bit about any women-centric products as well, right? I mean, these are some of the aspects that are also being covered, spoken about, and I think there is a lot of awareness that is required around these products. I mean, because the more we are able to talk about it, I think the more empowerment we are able to impart to women who don't have the awareness about these products. So, can I prod you to talk about it? Amit?
So, I'm actually not a finance student and I'm a marketing student. So, one of the subjects that was taught to us was consumer behavior. And a little part of that consumer behavior was to understand the uh, certain biases of, or stereotypes about the customers and position your product so that the sales goes up. Now, let's bring the same logic to the women-centric products. And anybody looking at such products must divide the products into two categories. One, where there is only an emotional appeal, and second, where there is an economic benefit. Take the one which has economic benefit. Now, irrespective of whether that also combines with an emotional appeal, it's okay. But take, for example, a simple stereotype that women love to spend, and that's why they have special credit cards with higher limits. I don't really, want to get into such a product personally, because that's a bad stereotype. Men also spend, and women also spend. Eventually, whatever all of us do is we spend money. If we don't spend money, we don't need money in the first place. So this is a bad stereotype. But take another example where a Sukanya Samruddhi kind of a product, which is for a girl child. Now, there is a real economic benefit in that product. Or take certain health insurance products which cover certain health issues specific to women. Look at those products. No, those have economic benefits. But if there's only an emotional appeal, be clear of that.
Yeah. I think Amit froze up a bit. Is it as he was speaking? I think we lost him for a moment, but I'll stay with you, Kiran. And I'm reminded, Amit was speaking about health insurance products for women, particularly taking care of some of the matters that are unique to them. I also believe, that awareness around these, sometimes these come in as riders. Some of these are not probably built into the product. So, I mean, glad to have you back. We just had a technical snag. I guess we saw you frozen for a minute. So, in case Amit is not able to come back in, Kiran, I still see him frozen, but let me come to you.
Yeah.
So, wouldn't you also want to make sure that everybody reads through these riders, look for such riders? Any light that you may want to throw on this?
See, as far as insurance products go, I think it does form the base before even you start investing. Insurance is something that everyone needs to look into. And what kind of insurance products you select depends on your particular life situation. So, obviously, On a broad parameter, there would be health insurance, life insurance, personal accident, and critical illness. These are the four areas that each family needs to look at. Now, within this, if you're looking at something in, say, the health insurance, so if there is a particular trait in your family, so certain kind of diseases run in families, they are known to be hereditary diseases. So, if there is any of those kind of risks, see how best you can cover that. So there are specific policies which offer, coverage for certain critical illnesses, or there are separate policies for cancer. There are separate policies for heart. So depending on the requirement based on your family situation and also the affordability, because obviously if you are taking so many insurance policies, there's a premium which will come up. And again, based on the family history, the premiums can also get loaded. So that is another possibility. So, basis this, I mean, you really need to figure out what is the optimal level of insurance that one is looking at. Now, as far as the women related insurance policies go, I would say that be very, use common sense in taking those kind of products. So, there could be certain benefits which are inbuilt into policies, which are maternity benefits. For a woman who's in a corporate job, she would probably get that from her employer. So does she really need to have this kind of policy? That is one question. And if she is not working, her husband would cover her in his corporate career. So see your situation. Now it could be different for a self-employed versus a corporate employee. So basis of what your personal situation is, you will have to select. Within that also, the maternity benefits, the amount that is covered, could be very small, say 25, 40,000. Whereas if you're living in a metro city, a maternity, a C-section kind of a scenario could push you back by about 1 lakh. So is that really going to help? So do you want to pay that extra premium in that policy for this particular benefit, which you might or might not use? So, these are questions that you really need to think about and then select. So it's not a cookie cutter answer for anybody that, okay, this is what suits you. But broadly, as I said, for insurance policies, and within that, then you select what suits your situation the best.
Thank you, Kiran. Let me come back to Amit. Amit, on this matter again, we were talking about women who start working. There are also corporate policies that take care of, health insurance. We are talking about this being a foundation to, the rest of the financial plans that every woman would build for herself and for her family. So, have you also seen, because, you've been involved in so many corporate trainings, you would be, privy to some of these ground level. Do you think that a lot of youngsters actually think that, because my company has got me covered on the health insurance part, I probably don't have to take one, and I will take one when I'm not employed anywhere. When nobody covers me, I will try to cover myself. Is that something that you've seen, and is that a red flag that you want to raise, if at all it is a red flag?
Well, it's a huge red flag. Actually, it's red color everywhere. Much bigger than a flag. And rather than talking about somebody else's story, let me talk about my story. While I was working, I had the health insurance policy, offered by the company. So the coverage was very much there. And I said, okay, the company is providing, why do I buy health insurance? Unfortunately, in my younger days, the only reason why somebody talked about buying a health insurance policy was that Section 80D benefit and nothing else. It was not about the risk cover, it was more about tax benefit. So I gave it a pass. And then at some stage, I got to know that I'm diabetic. And I'm type 1 diabetic, insulin dependent. So those days, the policies were not available. So when I left my job in 2008, after that, I was uncovered till 2021. 2021 is when I got a health insurance policy. Okay, so a huge red flag. Number two, even when the company covers you, have you read what is covered and what is not covered as part of the policy? Now, many companies take great care in ensuring good policies, but there could be pressures in certain companies financial pressure, for example. So when there is cost cutting, does the company negotiate with the health insurance company to cut down some of the benefits which appear like frills but are very critical for the person, simply to save the premium? And in many companies, what I've seen is it's the HR person who negotiates with the insurance company about health insurance, because it's under the KRA of the HR department to offer that policy. Now, the HR person is a great HR specialist, not a personal finance specialist. How much do they understand about health insurance? So, do they engage with somebody who knows that? So, these are some of the questions that one needs to ask and cover, without which the company pays the premium, shows in your CTC, and at the time of claim, there could be deficit in what you can claim. So these are definitely red flags. As Kiran was mentioning, do you really want to take a separate policy or not is a decision that you've got to take. And for that, go to your company, check the policy that you've taken, ask for a copy, read through that, or take a financial planner's help to understand or decipher what is written there, what is covered, what is not covered. I think that would be great service to your own family also.
So I would like to just add a bit on this. See, even if there is a job change, you could be in between jobs, and if you don't have a personal cover and if something happens in that short period, your savings could really be impacted. Whatever you invested, you'll have to draw from that. Even if I've heard cases where there is a 15-day gap, and in that gap period, people had to be hospitalized, and a huge chunk of money had to be paid off because they were not covered. So I think it really makes sense to take your own policy despite the coverage from your company.
So let's take that step take one step further, and this is not about a gap also. Suppose that somebody left a job and joined the next day somewhere, and in the a young person, maternity benefits are not covered on day one. There has to be a certain period to lapse, right? So when you go into a new job and the lady is already carrying, then when she delivers, expenses will not be covered if a particular period is not over, like something like 1 year in many insurance policies. So even when you have a policy, it's not covered, because now after conception, the insurance has been taken. That's how it will be seen. So these are nuances that one needs to keep in mind.
A ton of nuances out there, and
absolutely.
Yeah, and all the more important for young women to make note of this, and make sure that they have these conversations, be it with their own HR departments, whether they are trying to move from one company to another with the upcoming HR department, and besides that, with your own personal financial planner about taking it for yourself and your family. So this is these are great inputs. I mean, and very valid. Which kind of prompts me. We still have about 10 minutes. Prompts me to go to another interesting aspect and an important one. Kiran, let me come to you with this. I'm just going to connect the dots with your earlier book, on which we had a conversation very much here at Financial Planning Standards Board. And I must say, a lot of CFP professionals and candidates came back to share good words about that conversation. That book also kind of indicated, and it's pretty much there in many research reports as well, that women are most likely to outlive the men. And it's increasingly seen in not just our country now, but somewhere the quality of life that's there around. It's allowing the women to also outlive the men in many parts. But then that comes with a lot of related questions. How do you plan in such cases? Because I think everybody will have many questions around it. So Kiran, can I start with you on that, and maybe Amit, you can fill in.
Yeah. So absolutely, women and retirement together becomes even more critical. Retirement itself is a critical discussion in our country, because we've just about woken up to the dilemmas that retirement brings in terms of the longevity and the wealth required to live today. And when it comes to women, the double whammy is that women, if they have not handled money before, and in many cases we see women outlive their partners. In that scenario, that money management comes to them at an advanced stage where the learning capacity probably is low. They would be in emotional trauma, and that is when they have to handle that money. And also there could be claims on that money from family, which could come in, and in that emotional traumatic state they might hand over that money, which probably would be required for their own comfortable living for a lifetime. So these issues do come up, and that is the reason it becomes important to learn about money management earlier in good times. At least know the broader aspects, where your money is invested, who are the people concerned whom you can speak with, who are the people whom you can trust for advice, because there will be a lot of advice which will be required at a stage where the woman is the sole survivor amongst the couple, or even for women who have decided to stay single for that matter. How do you derive income out of whatever wealth you have? What do you do about the assets which are spread out? Because usually when there is a couple, there are money is invested in several places, and for a single person to manage them at a certain age becomes very difficult. Especially now we're seeing a lot of older couples and even women are facing difficulties because of digitalization, because they're not so comfortable with the new technology. So accessing their own wealth becomes problematic. Physically, it might be difficult for actually for them to go to various institutions and do the paperwork and claim the money. So simplifying the portfolio at a certain stage in a manageable way. So how do you handle that? There would be succession issues. So nominations, wills, everything comes into play at that time. So how do you devise your will? How do you change it? I mean, when you're a couple, how do you write the will? How does a sole survivor change the will? There will be issues raised to who will be the executor. There are issues about that. We see a lot of sole survivors face this question that who should be the executor, especially if the children are either abroad or children there are no children, so couples who are without issue. So these issues come up, and there are no simple answers to these. While there are institutions who act as executors, the costs are much higher. So does it really make sense to engage them for such kind of service, or do you bring in a third party who will help you in the execution of the will post your demise? So there are lots of these nuances which are there, and especially for women, because if they don't understand, it becomes much more complex in handling all these matters.
Amit, coming to you on this very same matter, since we are living in Mumbai and there are a few other jurisdictions in India where, the will also needs to be, further worked upon. Just wanted to, bring up that topic, is there something more you wanted to add? Although it's not directly connected to only women, but I guess, if the survivor is a woman, or if the survivor is somebody who doesn't know this, then what do you do with a will in a city like Mumbai? Is it to be probated? Is it necessary? Things like that, right? Over to you.
Yeah, so that's a the tough one, and especially with immovable properties, you've got to go for the probate, or in certain cases it's called letter of administration or something of that sort, where you've got to approach the court, and typically the time taken is around a year or sometimes longer also. So that's a thing that all of us need to understand. Now, as far as the financial investments are concerned, the good part is that up to a certain amount, if there are nominations, then the institution would make the payment to the nominee. So to that extent, at least claiming the money becomes that much easier. And then it's the nominee's duty to then distribute it among the beneficiaries or legal heirs or whatever. A good way, a lot of financial planners suggest, and this is something that Kiran had taught me earlier, that you align the names in the will and the nominations. So whoever you want to make the beneficial owner, put their names in as nominees. And then there are, the scope of disputes goes down drastically. So financial investments is little easier, but even within that, if the size is larger, then there could be issues, and one may need to go for probate, etc. PPF in particular, the act is still, it still does not make it easy. So let's say if there is no nomination, then a probate is a must if there is a will. Or otherwise you go to the court and get that succession certificate and stuff like that. So those are difficult aspects. Sincere request to everybody is, as Kiran was mentioning, keep it simple. Now, what is simple? A lot of times people think that a fixed deposit is simpler than a mutual fund, for example. But the advancements in mutual funds or the securities markets make it easier because there is an account where you need to put nomination. In case of fixed deposit, each instrument is considered a separate instrument.
Yeah.
I recently a friend had approached me, and it's a very similar case as to Kiran was describing. This guy lives in London, and his father is in Ahmedabad, and he was seeking help. So I actually connected him to a financial advisor in Ahmedabad, and now they are taking care of it. But at one point in time, uncle had 57 certificates, a combination of national saving certificates and bank deposit receipts. Okay, now 57 pieces of paper he had to manage. So then over a period of time, my friend said, Papa, you please don't start a new fixed deposit. When something matures, keep it in the savings account. Then we'll get somebody and consolidate it at one place. Now, if you have shares, there's a demat account. You can buy government securities in the demat account also. Yes. You can have mutual fund folios, and that becomes easier in terms of management. So while the product may appear cost a little difficult to understand, the operations become a lot more easier, and once to strike a balance between that complexity versus simplicity.
Thanks a lot, Amit. And I mean, I'm saving this for the last. I keep saying that the literature that we have for financial planning professionals, for the common man, there's a lot of articles, a lot of thanks to Indian media, they're very happy to carry aspects of personal finance in the mainstream journals and magazines and newspapers. But I think somewhere, if I look at it, we need to encourage a lot more people to write. Right, and I thought, maybe let me save this as the last question. What was the motivation to write, and what is your message to the rest of the professionals like you who have been practicing, who've been in the know of things? What would you want them to, or what would you encourage them to do, like what you've been doing?
So, my motivation came from a conversation I had with Ms. Uma Shashikant. I mean, she's been a great teacher in a lot other areas, but for me, she was also inspirational in starting my journey to write books. So one of the days I was discussing with her, I'd read a particular book written by an Indian author talking about retirement, and in that book, this author had written that in retirement, people prefer to move to warmer places. I said, hello. I mean, in India, many places, summers we have 45 and 47 degrees temperature. Now, how much warmer do you want to move to? So I was just discussing with her that here is a case where somebody has simply copy pasted something from US or Canada and put it in an Indian context. Her message was very powerful. She said, Amit, you've got no right to complain. If you don't like what is available, you write yourself.
Amazing.
Don't complain. I think that really hit me so hard. I said, yeah, wonderful. Then let's try and do that. So that was a trigger. And of course, with God's blessing, the guidance of people like her, and this is the 5th book So the journey continues. Uh, a few things I've learned along the way. Number one, when you write, your own clarity improves. Uh, Keeping everything in the mind often is, and mind is like, as Swami Vivekananda says, it's like a monkey who's stung by a scorpion and who's also drunk alcohol. So jumping from here and there, that's the mind. But if you put it on paper, that paper or a written word sort of becomes your word, and you stick to that. So that's a huge advantage. Your thinking becomes clear, and that reflects in a lot of other stuff that I do. So when I talk to people, I'm conscious about the words coming out of the mouth. I think that writing has helped in that way. So that's number two. Number three, uh, the first book when I wrote, I thought it will make me famous. It actually did to an extent. Suddenly, people's perception about me changed. So, though I remained the same, people started looking at me in a different way. Okay, this guy's an author, because not many can do it. And I think that also I don't agree, because when I was in school, I hated writing. In fact, in my language exams, I avoided writing essays because कौन लिखेगा इतना सारा. So if that was my starting point, and today 900 articles and 5 books, I think it's easy for anybody to write. It's just that you need to take the time out, do it in a diligent manner, and even writing also you need to do an SIP, and then the benefits accrue later. So keep writing. A lot of stuff that I've written is absolute rubbish, but then the world doesn't know, because I know and I see that that's rubbish, so I don't put it in public. So you keep doing, and then over a period of time, it just happens. And the final point, which is related to the third point, is for a financial advisor, your book becomes your business card. Yeah, go and give it to your clients, go and give it to your prospects. And believe me, less than 10% are going to read the full thing. But the moment they see your name as the author, the origin of the word author and that of the word authority is the same. So you are seen as an authority in a particular area. So write your story, print it. Today there are a lot of self-publishing platforms also available. You don't really need to worry much. But please write. There is a huge requirement of Indian literature written by Indian author in the Indian context, and that's what the consumer wants.
Great. So from not writing essays to writing 5 books and 800-900 articles, I'm sure Amit has come a long way as a great student for his teachers to come look at him and say, I taught him English, I taught him Hindi, I taught him Gujarati. Great. Keep writing, Amit. Now you can write in space too.
Will do.
Yeah.
Your message to the
Yeah. So see, actually, my journey started with the idea when I started my financial planning practice. Planning itself was not known. Financial planning was a very new area for most people in our country. So though it was very well known in the US and other developed countries, in India it was very new. So the idea behind my writing was to popularize the concept of financial planning and why it is important for families to look at financial planning for themselves. Because till then it was more product centric. So it would be either mutual funds or it would be fixed deposits or whatever other things were available. So personal finance itself was not a very well developed area. So that is how my journey started in terms of writing. And as Amit was saying, as you write more, your thoughts become clearer and you learn. And if I would want to write for on a particular topic which I was not very clear about, I would go and read more, and then I would actually have some command over that topic, and then that would come out as an article. So that way you also learn. So it's like growing while learning. So even when writing these books, I mean, I think when I wrote Mindful Retirement, that was the first time I actually read the Bhagavad Gita from page to page, first to last. I had tried this several times earlier, but it never happened. But when I was about to write a book, I wanted that clarity. I wanted to go through it. So that is the first time I ended up actually reading it completely. So you develop, and there are several other things, like there are several acts which are there, your succession acts, and also you never end up reading it. You just pick up the parts that you are interested in for a particular case, and you leave it. But when you're writing a book, you need to read much deeper. So then you end up reading a lot, and that clarifies your thought, and your language improves, and that is how it comes out on paper. So initially, the first drafts could be really poor, and then you keep on refining. So the idea which I learned from, I think, some other author, that you don't go and read while you're writing. So just put down your thoughts on paper, let it come out, finish it, and after that go and revise. Because if you start refining, you will never end what you have to say. So say what you have to say, and then refine your language and the grammar and everything later. And I think I've been really lucky in having friends like Amit, who write a lot, and we have a lot of these discussions, conversations, which also bring up lot many ideas and how to put it on paper. So it's been a great journey so far, and I think there is a lot more left. I mean, yes, the books are I'm on a break right now, but definitely there's a lot more to come. So it's a very interesting thing to do.
Great, awesome. I'm sure there's a lot more to come, and I'm also looking forward to having a lot more conversations like this with both of you. So thank you, Kiran. Thank you, Amit, for taking time out and for sharing all these perspectives. Good luck. Keep writing, and to all of you who've been tuning in to these conversations, keep sharing these with your friends, your family, with your relatives, whether they are in India or abroad, because there's always something to learn from these conversations. Thank you again, and see you again. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.